And welcome inside episode 93 of Breaking Bats, presented by Not For Long Media. My name is Justin Ayers. Big episode this week. Big episode because with the news that the Cincinnati Reds had declined the option of Joey Votto, making him a free agent for the first time in his career, probably ending his career in Cincinnati. I'm a big Joey Votto fan. I always have been. I always will be. I think he's the best. With that news all going down, I wanted to have senior MLB writer for The Athletic, Trent Rosecrans, covers the Reds, recurring guest. I wanted to have him on, talk all about what Joey's meant to the city of Cincinnati, his career, his future in the game, and a whole bunch of other stuff, which is so much fun. So Trent is the man. Really appreciating coming on. Before we get to Trent, though, we wanted to give a shout out to two quick apparel sponsors of this podcast. One of my favorite brands out there, Few Will Hunt. It's a great American company out of Philadelphia. They're out to restore the dignity of hard work. It's my favorite shirt I work out in. It's one of my favorite shirts, period. Check them out, fewillhunt.com. And also, Shoreboy Clothing Company. Fall, winter. Look, we're in those winter months, but that doesn't mean you still can't capture the essence of a summer at the Jersey Shore in Shoreboy Clothing Company. Check them out, shoreboy.co. Check them out. All right. With that all being said, let's get to our interview this week with Trent Rosecrans. Enjoy. All right, we are now joined by a very special two-time recurring guest, friend of the podcast, senior writer for The Athletic, covering the Reds, Trent Rosecrans. Trent, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much for hopping on here. There's a lot to talk about. There's been a lot of Reds news lately, so I wanted to have you on. But how are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Did you anticipate the offseason starting so quickly, so rapid fire for your offseason here?
Yeah, I mean, like they had 5 days from the end of the World Series to make this decision, and I think we all saw kind of the writing on the wall, and you knew where they were kind of probably headed with this, and it stinks. It's part of the whole thing, but I was thinking about it. It's like I went from Ken Griffey Jr. and had a little overlap in '07 and '08 to Joey Votto. Now, we didn't know that Joey Votto was going to be Joey Votto in '07 and '08, but you knew he was going to be a pretty good player. I mean, if you were going to bet on, if you would have told us at the time, like, okay, one of these guys is going to be a Hall of Fame player, it probably wouldn't have been Votto. It would have been Jay Bruce. Jay Bruce had a very good career. Maybe even Homer Bailey, who had a pretty good career himself, or the third guy. I mean, you look at it; it's funny. I've gone back a couple times and looked at their '08 prospect list in Baseball America. I think I have that downstairs. I don't have it with me right now, but it's like one Jay Bruce, two Homer Bailey. I don't remember if Cueto was three or Votto was three, and then the other guy was four. I mean, you had I think Todd Frazier, Zach Cozart, Devin Mesoraco, Sam LeCure, so many guys in there. I think like 29 on that list was Justin Turner. I think technically for oh no for that would have been '08, but yeah, Justin Turner was on that list. It's insane. Like, and you look at it, and it's like, oh, when you see in retrospect a group with that much talent, in retrospect, you see, oh, why they were successful from '02 to or from 2010 to 2013, that 4 year window with a lot of those guys who were just coming up. And you always kind of like look at those in 6 year chunks because that's what you have team control over, right? And, you have guys like Todd Frazier and so many others in there. But looking back on it, it's like, oh yeah, Joey Votto, pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah, obviously we're of course referring to the news of the Reds declining his option. I went back, Trent. I was telling you this before we started taping. I went back and listened to our interview from last year, and you mentioned Ken Griffey Jr. and how Joey Votto kind of started his career at the end of Ken's career. I wanted to go back to that because there's a point you made, and I thought it was fascinating. I should have asked you more about it then. When Ken was at the end of his time in Cincinnati, and Joey was there as a very young kid watching this all go down, like, what impact do you think that had on his decision to stay in Cincinnati as long as he did? And like, have you talked to those two guys or even Joey just about like that '07, '08, like what impact that had on his Cincinnati Reds tenure?
I haven't, and I probably should. I think that's a good catch by you. What that looked like, because you saw it, and it was tough because Ken Griffey Jr. is from Cincinnati. This is his hometown, and for quite a while, it was his dream to come play here, and it was dream of Reds fans to have the hometown kid here, and it didn't quite work out like anybody wanted it to. Ken had some very good years here, had a great career. He's freaking Ken Griffey Jr., right? But still, it always kind of felt like it wasn't. It never lived up to what everybody had hoped it would be. And then he did have, you know, his next to last season was that coming back to Seattle after going to Chicago in '08, coming back to Seattle and having so much success in '09. I think that's right. They all run together. But then his last year, not as much, and he kind of quit, or he retired during the season. And it's one of those things where this time comes for everybody. It comes for Joey Votto. It comes for Counsell Jr. It comes for Cody, apparently, the dog. So like it's part of what we do here, and one of the reasons we love it is it is always ever changing. But Father Time is undefeated, as we've heard so many times, and it is difficult to see it happen right in front of you, and it's not. These things rarely end like you would like them, but in the end, they all end.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I'm seeing a lot of reports. So I read obviously the statement that the Reds put out. I saw Joey's video. I'm also seeing some rumors floating around that the door might not be 100% closed. Have you heard this? And is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I mean, we asked Nick Kroll. I've talked to Nick Kroll, the Reds president of baseball operations. I've talked to Joey, and nobody is saying it could never happen, but I think a lot of things would have to happen, and it would have to be just right on so many things. Joey still believes that he can play every day, and that the last 2 years were more of a result of the injury than the aging curve. And when you look at his 2021, it was really good. I mean, he was MVP votes. He was one of the best in the game. And, I think he believes that he can still do that. And that the last 2 years were more about the shoulder than they were being now 40 years old. But the problem is he believes that he can still play every day. And again, it's Joey. I never put anything past him because he's proven time and time again that you just never doubt the guy. But who is going to take that commitment? Where is it where he can play every day? If he doesn't want to be kind of that bench bat part-time player, maybe a platoon player, even like the role that Brandon Belt had in Toronto last year. If he still thinks he can be every day and he's not going to settle for something like that, I just don't know where that is. And hopefully I'm wrong and somebody gives it to him and he proves us all wrong. I don't know, but that is going to be a challenge.
I did see today, I was reading the rumor mill about this, about the hometown Toronto Blue Jays, being intrigued, I guess is what they were maybe calling it.
Sure.
It obviously makes sense. Do you foresee a situation where, you're right. I'm looking at the roster and the playing time situation. It probably would be hard for him to go somewhere and get 130, 40 plus games every day.
Yeah. I just don't know where that is, especially at a place, a non-premium defensive position at first base, first base and DHing. There's a lot of guys who fit that profile, and many of them are much younger and much cheaper. And so that is the big question.
Last time you were on, you mentioned that Joey liked the idea of being like a player in one uniform for his entire career. And I think most athletes probably, if you ask them, like that idea too, the Cal Ripken Jr., I came in as a Oriole, I'll retire as an Oriole, that kind of thing. How much of an adjustment do you think that'll be for him if he doesn't end up going back to the Reds and he does go to the Blue Jays or some other team? Like, it is kind of weird seeing like players, especially like him, like just in a different uniform.
Right, the Mike Piazza Marlins uniform pictures. Even though Mike Piazza you kind of is iconic in two different franchises, so probably not the best example. But there are those guys like Will Clark is a Cardinal. Larry Walker is a Cardinal. Those are weird ones to me. Even though again, those are guys probably who weren't. I'm trying to think of a better example of somebody who was at one place their whole career. Willie Mays. You don't think of him as a Met, but that doesn't change the greatness of Willie Mays. And no matter what kind of how it looks, it's not gonna like lessen Joey Votto as the baseball player and what he has accomplished. So it will be really weird to see him in a different uniform if that does happen. Although I think there is something about it being, if it were Toronto, it would be just kind of interesting just because, I mean, that is, I had I think it was 2 years ago, the Reds were in Toronto and I was there and I went to like Joey's childhood home and wrote about that scene and talked to him about it. And he had actually he met me there and then we rode from his childhood home. He gave me the ride downtown to my hotel, which was right next to the stadium. And like him just recounting going from there, from where he grew up to just what a special thing it was to him as a kid to go to a Blue Jays game at Rogers Center Skydome, and you could feel what it meant to him to just take that drive and all the places along the way. So I mean, while I think it would be cool if he were a Cincinnati Red forever, there would be something cool about the him in Toronto. But it's different in Toronto than maybe so many other places. Just because, especially now, like the Blue Jays are not just Toronto's team; they're Canada's team, and Joey Votto is arguably he and Larry Walker, and are arguably the greatest Canadian baseball players of all time. Ferguson Jenkins you throw in there as well, but those guys, it would be really interesting just to see him play there, especially like Larry Walker started his career in Montreal, and so he got that chance to be that Canadian icon. But it's even more so because Joey did grow up in the Toronto area.
That's such a great point. Yeah, and we've seen him on TV in the Canadian Mountie uniform, so it's like he's already kind of like maybe a quarter of the way there.
Yeah.
I read, and as I'm sure you did, Joey wrote this article about like going through the minor leagues. I think it was called a bus ride. One of the most well-written, like it was the most captivating thing I've ever read. But in it, he described himself as a skinny, shy, passive Canadian kid. And I think that's probably when you first met him, like way back when. What's it been like watching him evolve as a person and just like as a player after all these years?
Yeah, my first real memory of Joey was at the Futures game in Pittsburgh. Homer Bailey started for the Team USA, and this was back when it was USA versus World. And he was the reason I was there because he was the Reds' top prospect, one of the top pitching prospects in baseball, and he was starting the Futures game. I think he started, but anyway, he was in there early. And so that's my main story the whole time. And I'm like, well, I got a notebook. Oh yeah, I'll go talk to this Canadian kid that's on the world team. And I talked to him. Is just this like shy Canadian kid. He's probably 21, 22 at the time. And I think he was in Double A at the time, and he would play the next year in the Futures game, and I think in San Francisco when I was 7. But that was 05, I think. Anyway, it all kind of runs together at this point. But yeah, that was the first one, and then I remember the next year in spring training, just kind of talking to this Canadian kid who got a call up into big league camp, and like to see it to go from that who was a shy Canadian kid to a Hall of Famer and like a Hall of Fame personality and player, which you don't always get that combination. And he really is. I've been blessed in my career because the baseball career, every baseball team I've ever covered on a daily basis has had either Ken Griffey Jr. or Joey Votto, and that's pretty good. And not a lot of people have that kind of thing, and I've been able to do that. And it's going to be weird not to have them, but I will have Ellie De La Cruz. And so Ellie's another one of those where it's like, it's funny. I can remember the first time I heard his name, and then the first time I saw him, and it's there are some similarities to me, just in my own little personal journey that like it was 2021, like August of 2021. I'm in a hotel room in Louisville, and an agent calls me. He goes, "Hey, man, I just talked to some Reds people, and they said we found our Tatis." I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" And he's like, "Yeah, they kind of said maybe he's not exactly Tatis, but the kid's pretty good." And I was like, "Who is this?" And they're like, "There's a 6'5" switch hitting shortstop that they think is that good." And I'm like, "That's insane." And then like, it's nuts that usually at that time when you hear about somebody, you hear like the sky high projections. You're always like, "Oh, the ceiling's not going to get higher than this," but the floor is so low. And the thing is, with him, they both moved up. Where then it was like, okay, no, he could be as good as Tatis, or the ceiling went from almost Tatis to the ceiling being best player in baseball to the ceiling being generational talent. And then the floor being never make it out of A ball to right now his floor would be possibly a plus defender at shortstop. Pretty important position. And a switch hitter who's going to, even if he gets on base at a 290 clip, he could still hit you 30 homers by accident and steal 50 bases. And like, that's almost the floor at this point, if he stays healthy. And so it's insane. It's been nuts to watch that. But like, I don't know that anybody was talking about that with Joey Votto. Like Joey, I just remember like, "Oh, this kid can hit." This was, I remember 07 and 08. Like, oh man, that kid can really hit. He comes up at 07. You're like, he hit pretty well. And 08, there's like, wait, they re-signed Scott Hatteberg? Huh. Maybe they're not all sold on this kid. And then a couple months later into the season, Scott Hatteberg had played his last games. And Joey Votto had started on his trajectory. And it's been unbelievable to watch. And it's weird to think of a Reds team without Joey Votto. Now I've seen it because of injuries, but even when he was injured, he was still a presence. Just the fact that he would be back, and now we don't have that.
Yeah. Dang. Is there a home run or a hit from Joey's career that is like the most memorable or maybe the most significant in your opinion?
That's a great question because there are just so many. Like I still go back, even though like the 17 season was unbelievable. Like that is impressive as it was. But then 12, he was off to an incredible start, and then he got hurt, and he came back and just decided to stop making outs. And when he came back, he didn't have any power, but he was like a 500 on base percentage of the once he returned. In 12, and that was such a good team. But like, I still think of that run in 21, where he hit home runs in like 8 straight games, and the ninth, maybe that's the one that sticks with me the most, is the one that wasn't a home run because it was in the ninth game, his last at bat at Citi Field, and he hit the top of the fence. I mean, he was like 2 inches from being 9 in a row. And what was funny was, I think he said, somebody asked him, it was, well, hey, the first one was a Great American Ballpark home run. It probably wouldn't have been out anywhere else. And I got kind of lucky on that one. So it all evens out. And I mean, it's a typical Joey kind of answer. He was right, but it's also just insane. Like The funny one, I think you mentioned this. The other one that sticks with me was in spring training, and it was in a story. I think we talked about it last time. It was when Yu Darvish first came over, and he threw in one of those big looping Yu Darvish curveballs, and he told the catcher, and I've talked to several people who confirmed this, and it's just that if he throws me that again, I'm hitting it out of the stadium. And at the time, we didn't know that was what he was saying, but you saw it. You could always see Joey like just thinking, and like he got fooled on that one badly, and then like you could just kind of tell that even though this was spring training, it meant something because this was Yu Darvish. This was the guy. I mean, that first year he came over, it was such an enigma, and then he literally hit it out of the stadium, and it was just unreal. And then talking to the other guys afterwards, and like, oh yeah, he called it. It was insane. So like, it's funny. Like I can remember like certain ones for a lot of people, but with Joey, there are just so many, and so many of them are tied up in what we learned later or maybe before, because everything just is. It had that little bit extra because it was Joey, and he always had something behind it. He was always one step ahead of everybody, and it was a pleasure to watch so many of Joey Votto's games over this Hall of Fame career.
Getting sad now. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
also
it's
going
weird.
back.
Like I'm still trying to
Yeah,
deal with it, you know?
it's a lot to process. Like one of my biggest regrets is that like after you told that story, I went to go try to find a video of that. Maybe because it's spring training, maybe because it was 10 years ago, but MLB really has to up their video game from back then. I really cannot find any single video of anything from back then.
Yeah, it's hard. And it is, I mean, it was a while ago and technology has changed in games. What we expect in all those are weird, but like I still just remember it clear as day, right center field, out, and like seeing people looking over, and it was just amazing.
I liked his first one back this year, mostly because John
Oh,
Sadak. Every one of John Sadak's home run calls is my favorite because they're all a little bit different, but there's just something about that first one back, the Joseph Daniel Votto. I'm like, that hits.
yeah. I mean, it's tough. It's gonna be tough for John to ever top that ball had a family.
Yep.
The Ellie De La Cruz's first homer off Noah
That's
Syndergaard. And John's fantastic. Like there is nobody. I refuse to believe that there's anybody in this game on the broadcast side who prepares more than John. And John is just a positive, like great person. I love John, and I've gotten to know him pretty well over the last couple of years. And his energy level, he's very excited. Like some people think it's fake or over the top, and if you know John, it's just John. And what was great was that, you know, his first couple of years, he was not dealing with a team that matched his energy level. And this year, that team matched. He was the perfect voice for this team, this young, exciting team. And it's been really cool to watch because I told John the next day after that ball had a family. It's like, you know what, you cemented yourself last night. It was a perfect call, and you were the perfect person to make that call. And it's been really cool to watch.
you won't find a bigger John Sadak fan than myself. I'll get like MLB like TV and I'll just watch the Reds games. One because I like you guys and like the Reds, but also I just want to hear his calls and like the way he calls a game. It's the best. Like as
Like
an Orioles fan, I'm also a Reds fan now.
he wants to be there. Like and that's the thing, is he loves all that excitement is 100% genuine. And John's just a great dude, special guy. And I think it's probably taken a while for Reds fans to pick up, just because, like, you know, if the announcer is calling like, "Oh, the Reds lose again," you're not going to love them, you know.
Yeah.
Like, and I think Marty Brennaman will be the first person to tell you, and I think he has told me this before. It's like, you know, he was so lucky that he got popped in what was his first year? Was it 75 or 74? I think it was 70. It was one of those 73, 74, 75. Like, I mean, he got popped in the big red machine. And like, if you're making a call of the Big Red Machine, well, people are going to enjoy it because it usually means hearing your voice is a win. And with John, I'm so glad that the team kind of matches his energy and his excitement. And the way the team played on the field this year was a team with energy and excitement. And it was super cool to see that kind of fit together. I think the Reds have a sneaky good broadcasts. The radio, Tommy Thrall does a fantastic job. Jeff Brantley is fantastic. And Chris Welsh works really, really well with John Sadak, and I think Barry Larkin's really improved and gotten very good with Chris Welch and John, and so it's been fun. Like those guys had some big shoes to fill, and I think they're doing a really nice job.
We interrupt this episode to bring you a word from the official sponsor of Not For Long Media and the Breaking Bats podcast, the original Fudge Kitchen. It is a staple of the Jersey Shore with 6 locations in Cape May, Wildwood, North Wildwood, Stone Harbor, and Ocean City. The original Fudge Kitchen makes all of their fudge in-store guaranteeing a delicious product, so stop by and let them know that Not For Long Media and Breaking Bats sent you. Check them out online at fudgekitchens.com as they are shipping fudge and sweet treats all across the country. Now back to the episode. Such a great point. I never even thought of it like that. Yeah, associating the broadcasters with like the quality of the team itself, like that you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back because you mentioned Hall of Fame, and we talked a little Hall of Fame last time, but I wanted to talk about a couple things with the Hall of Fame. One is, we'll start with the easy one, of just like the candidacy of Joey Votto. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I've had this debate with multiple friends of mine. Like when you look at the way his career stacks up, and maybe we'll even compare it with like a guy like Todd Helton, like, can you see a case for Joey Votto getting into Cooperstown?
I struggle to see a case for him not getting in. And I think there's a couple things, and I wrote this. I think this was my first story for the Athletics. So this is 5 years ago, and some things have changed since then, or 6 years ago. Sorry, jeez, time flies. But the thing here is, he is a little bit different because he is a product of his times, where he doesn't have the hit total, but on base total, he's gotten on base 3,500 times. That's a lot with those hits and the walks. I mean, the statistical bar, the only one I think he needed to clear that he has was the 2,000 hits, because that is kind of when you look at it. But with that and 1,400 walks or whatever, still had power, still did RBI, there are just so many ways to look at it. Okay, so when I was growing up, batting titles were the thing. George Brett was my favorite player all time. And so like 3 batting titles, 3 in different decades. I mean, 3 batting titles is a great career. Joey Votto's career spans the time and really does span the start of Moneyball on. Like Moneyball, what's funny is the Moneyball draft is the Joey Votto draft. And the A's had, you think about the A's, the Billy Bean, Moneyball, the movie, the book, everything. You think about, getting on base percentage over batting average. And, they're in the book, there's a lot about Billy Bean really being obsessed with getting Kevin Youkilis, the so-called Greek god of walks. Like, it's not Greek, he's Jewish, but a whole different story. Cincinnati guy, actually. And so what's funny about that is, and then another big part about Moneyball is the draft. Well, the A's had 7 picks before the Reds took Joey Votto in the second round. And if there's one guy that encapsulates getting on base, it's Joey Votto. For, I think it's a span of 9 years, 8 of those he was healthy. From I think it's 2010 to 2008, or 2010 to 2018, or whatever. Those 7 or 8 years that he was healthy, he has 7 on base titles in the National League. And the one where he was healthy that he didn't get it, he lost to Bryce Harper by 1/1000th of a point. Like, he was second, and Bryce just nipped him. And that was Bryce Harper's first MVP year, and he was phenomenal. So when you think about that, like 7 on-base titles in 9 years, If even now, if you told me a guy that won 7 batting titles in 9 years, and if we are now saying that on base percentage is more important than batting average, but you said 7 batting titles in 9 years, you're like, well, Hall of Famer, yeah. Like I mean, that's like Tony Gwynn crap, and Rod Carew. I mean, that is what you're talking about here, and um, it's really hard for me to make a case that he is not a Hall of Famer.
You made a really good point about like the way that we view Hall of Famers has evolved. Like in the past, it was like you have to have like 500 home runs and 3,000
Three,
hits, and for
uh-huh,
pitchers, it had to be like 300 wins, I think it was. But
yeah,
like, I like the fact that like as time goes on, like that we kind of like get more rational with our expectations of Hall of Famers. Like I think 200 wins is just as good as 300 wins for a career for a Hall of Famer.
now it
Like I
is.
was, yeah.
Now
But like
it's like
20
this
years
is a
ago, people
different
were like,
ballgame.
ew, 200? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing you have to remember, the voting body changes every year. It skews younger. In 5, 6, 7 years, whenever Joey Votto goes in, I'm going to be an old voter, not a young voter. And my generation and younger value the things that Joey Votto did well. And so that's why I think that's another overlooked part of this discussion is, you're talking about those traditional numbers. Well, that's the generation before me. That's what they held on to. My generation looks at a much different type of thing.
Yeah, it's like WAR. It's like that was the thing with Scott Rowland's candidacy. I think it was like he had like one
Yeah.
of the highest WARs for a third baseman, and people were like, you look at the vanity metrics of a baseball career, and you're like Scott Rowland. You're like, okay, maybe, but then you look at the advanced ones like WAR and some of these other ones. You're like, oh yeah, like that guy.
Yeah.
That guy did it.
Yeah. I mean, like there are guys that, I mean, I feel the same way about, like when I say Joey Votto, like I don't see how he's not. I I could almost make the case for Scott Rowland not being, but I voted for him every single time. Guys like Tim Raines took him too long. Larry Walker, I was one of the biggest Larry Walker proponents that there has been, and those guys, I think, as we've gotten a little bit further away, we've really appreciated them more.
Do you think Nelson Cruz will get in?
That's a really interesting one. I don't know. And that's where those 5 years really do help. I know it's a weird kind of just like, it seems, I don't know, arbitrary at times, but I think it's really important to have those 5 years and to have that little bit of separation.
I think last time you were on, you had like a physical notebook of like your
I do.
your Hall of Fame notebook. Can you take me to the Hall of Fame notebook for this upcoming class? Because there's some guys that are like on their last year of eligibility. There's some great first year guys like Beltre. Like, what are you looking for when you fill out your 2024 ballot?
Oh, I haven't even thought about it yet, but we're getting there, aren't we? It's November, end
Yeah.
of the month that we get the ballot. Yeah, Beltre, like I'm not spending any time on Beltre because that's an easy check, right? I mean, like what Beltre was like one of the greatest defenders of all time at his position, 3,000 hits. But yeah, like no brainer. What else? I don't have it in front of me. I don't have my computer in front of me. I'm sorry. I'm
Well,
out of
there's
my
like
office.
Utley and Maurer are the other big first year
Ooh,
guys.
they're
Yeah.
really interesting, and I think, I mean, Utley's a tougher one. And one of the things with Utley is you look at his age when he debuted. So his longevity is not going to be as much as others because I think was he like 24, 25 when he debuted? If you look it up, I know it's later. This is all off the top of my head. I haven't started my notebook yet this year. But
24.
when you 24, yeah. So, but that's older, right? For a Hall of Fame career, and that's one of the things that's kind of worked against Joey too. Joey was 23. Joey, for many years, would just say, and I think he's still, if you ask him today, he was brought up too late. And you could probably agree with that. But there's Utley's going to be a tough one. But like, if you go back to that, was he the best at his position for his generation? Yeah. I mean, right. And then who else did you just say? Oh,
Uh,
Mauer. Like
yeah.
Mauer is such a different one because he is a different type of player. He wasn't the slugger, but he was such a great hitter. He was a good defender. You take into some of those injuries too, like with the concussions and all that. I'm a big Hall guy, so I don't have it here, but I think like just my gut, and I haven't done this, so it's not sure. But I think those are both guys I'll probably check off.
I know in the past you mentioned you fill out like all 10 every single year, which I love. There's some writers who are very selective. They'll put like 2 on there, and it always makes me mad. It's like you have 10, use 10.
Yeah, well, I hate that we only have 10. Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the great Derek Gould, when he was president, he he proposed what he called the binary ballot. If it's a yes/no thing, are they a Hall of Famer or not? And the Hall did not agree with it. The Baseball Writers Association took it to them. It is not our decisions of how they look or how the voting process works. It's theirs, and so they did not agree with that one. And we've had some other type of things. We tried to get it to 12, and they're like, no. My thing is, it's kind of how I don't really complain about down ballot voting. I saw somebody like just I had one like I can't believe that Spencer Steer is not a finalist for NL Rookie of the Year over James Outman. I'm like, okay, I can see your argument, but like, who cares? Corbin Carroll's going to win it unanimously. Like, I don't care about second place. I don't care about third place down voting. Now, I mean, those do come in, and when I do vote, like I guess I had Cy Young this year. I take my fifth place vote as seriously as my first place, but in the end, the whole process is to find the one, and everything else is just, byproduct.
Ooh. But also with awards like Cy Young, like you can see guys like Dylan Bundy got Cy Young votes one year. And it's like it always helps guys' careers and like maybe even helps them financially too. So like do you ever think about that aspect when you're voting for the active player awards? You're like getting this guy on the top 10 of whatever award that is, that might help him out a little bit.
I don't think of it that way. I just try to do my best job, and I think like Dylan Bundy wasn't thinking about like, oh, I hope I get Cy Young votes. No, he wanted to do the best job he could, right? And so I think that's a big part of it is we're all just trying to do our best job that we can do. And there are byproducts of that. There are consequences. And that's exactly why you try to do the best that you can. And you don't just mail it in after one. And like, that's why the NL, like the MVP voting is so difficult because it's 10 and you go 1 through 10. And like, honestly, it's the 1, 2, 3 is always easier than 7, 8, 9, 10. I spend more time on 7, 8, 9, 10 than I do 1, 2, 3.
Dang. This is a side that I've never actually thought of because I didn't actually know that you voted for the in-season awards, but now in my head I'm just fascinated by this. We'll have to come back to this at a later date, but we'll also have to get the Hall of Fame notebook at a later date as well.
Yeah, we'll do that when I'm in my office because it's right there and keep it like right there in my office.
That's the best. That's one of the most underrated times in the sports calendar. Is that time in when is it? January? Like MLB Hall of Fame voting season?
Yeah, because it's usually due December 31st, or you have to mail it by December 31st.
Yeah.
And they send us the ballot. We usually get the ballot right around Thanksgiving, so I often get it on my birthday, which is kind of fun. It's like a cool little birthday gift.
I like that. All right, I just had a couple last things for you, Trent. I appreciate your time here tonight.
Of course.
There's a guy on the Reds, and caused a little controversy this year. There's so many rumors about his name, and I just read another rumor from John Morosi about Jonathan India, about how popular his name is becoming on trade markets, and the Reds are listening, and they have so much depth. What are you hearing about Jonathan India? And is this going to continue like the kind of rumor mill swirling circulation for him?
Yeah, I think so. John's a really good player. He's a really good player. And his value goes beyond the statistics he puts up. He is, I've said this many times, and I've said this to John, and I've said this to others. Like the team this year, the way they all played like Jonathan India. John plays really, really hard. He's a good guy in the clubhouse. Everybody respects the heck out of him because he works, and that's why Joey went to him. Like Joey recognized that early, and like his rookie year, like he and Joey, like Joey just respected the way he went out of or about the job, and it is, I think it's indicative of the leadership, and like you can poo-poo that all you want, but I really think he set a tone in the clubhouse and on the field, and that would be hard to replace, especially if you're replacing Joey Votto as well. I mean, it's a very different clubhouse without either of those two. But the other part is with the change in rules and no shifting, Jonathan is a hard-nosed player, but he's not the best defensive second baseman. He does not have the most range. He is not the most athletic. And so at second base, it's tougher for him, especially now that you can't hide second baseman like you used to be able to with the shifting and having a shortstop over on that side of the field. You're responsible for so much more as a second baseman after the rule changes, and so that's huge. And then you have Matt McLain, and Matt McLain's good. Matt McLain's really good. Ellie De La Cruz, Noelvi Marte. I mean, like you just think of that, like that talent. Where does Jonathan India fit? I don't know that he's athletic enough to play the outfield. So you're talking second base, some maybe first base. You also have Spencer Steer. Now, Spencer's not the most gifted defender, but he is versatile enough, and he'll play all those different positions and can do different things. But maybe he's your first baseman. He did that pretty well last year, and in addition to playing third base, second base, and left field, a position he had played. I think he had played in the outfield one game before this year in his entire life. And then he went out and played in the outfield in the big leagues. And then was the team's most productive offensive player. We were voting for team MVP, and I actually don't even remember who I voted for, if it was him or TJ Friedel. It was one or the other. But like you're talking about those kind of guys. Having too many good players is a good problem. And Nick Krall has a lot of really good players at his disposal right now.
I hear that phrase so often, and I'm sure it's probably the most overused phrase when it comes to the Reds. It's like, hey, it's a good problem to have. All this talent. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but there are places that you have to do it right. You can disrupt it. They had this like vibe this year that was, as the kids would say, it was immaculate, man. And it just, it can, we'll see what it's like next year, because, part of that was they played loose and free because there were zero expectations on this team. I joked at the beginning of the year, like once they won their first game, I was like, well, they've already exceeded expectations because a lot of people were expecting them to go 0-162. And so like, that is not what they did. And coming into this year, especially, Counsell leaving and whatever else, because the Cardinals are kind of weird. I don't know what's going to happen, but there will probably be people who pick them to win this division next year. And that is a far cry from what the expectations were this year.
That actually segues amazing into my next question, because it is about the Milwaukee Brewers and Craig Counsell and the Cubs and this whole drama that's unfolded with the managerial position. Do you think that Counsell kind of like reset the market for managers in his decision to go to the Cubs and make, was $8 million a year for 5 years? Do you think this will reshape?
A little more than 40 for 5. And here's how about this? 1993, Barry Bonds goes to the Giants, the biggest deal of all time, changes really the fortunes of both the Pirates and the Giants. That was a 6-year deal worth $43.75 million for Barry Bonds. I mean, we hear all the time that the managers don't matter, right? The smart smart teams, the managers don't matter. Cubs are a pretty smart team, and they're putting 40 million. That matters.
Do you think this is there gonna be like a ripple effect after this, where you think teams like the way they look at managers and like the top tier ones like Craig Counsell? Do you think this is just gonna be like the first domino that like are good managers finally gonna start to reap the benefits of their good managing?
I'm not sure because like what makes a good manager is so difficult to tell, and it is so much. Like Dusty Baker's been a great manager, and like I don't know that there's anybody who could have done that with the Astros that he handled. But there's still some issues with Crane and all that last year, and I don't know. I think it's going to be. Will it be an outlier or a trendsetter? It's too early to know. But like there are very few guys who are respected quite like him. Maybe Bruce Bochy, but they're all older, and we don't know who these guys are yet. And he's certainly I've thought he's the best manager in the game for the last couple of years. But there was also a time where we thought that Joe Madden was the best manager in the game, and the Cubs fired their manager at their time because they could get Joe Madden, and put a knife in the back of Rick Renneria, send him down to the South Side, and I don't know, maybe David Ross will be on the South Side here soon. Who knows?
Yeah, it is fascinating. And it's also funny. It's also the Cubs who did that again. My last question, Trent. The last time you were on, you told a fantastic story about Ken Griffey Jr. and Star Wars. And we put it out. It was one of my favorite clips. It did super, super well. Everybody loved it. Have you talked to Ken about that since then? And also just like, are there other things that like the general public may not know about Ken from your time knowing him?
Oh, so much. Trying to think what I could share. But Ken is one of the like I think one of the things is people used to ask me like, oh, what's Ken Griffey Jr. doing now? I'm saying he's doing exactly what he's always wanted to do, and that's be the greatest dad in the world. And I did send him a text the other day. I haven't heard back from him. It was during the World Series. I was just like, geez, I think I see you now more than I did when when I was covering you because of all the World Series things. I was like, at least somebody got smart and finally put Melissa on air too, because Melissa's awesome. His wife Melissa is she's great. She's wonderful, and she puts up with a lot. And so I'm trying to think of a good story. It's funny, the Field of Dreams game. He was I got to kind of hang out with him before that game and his dad, and it was really really kind of neat. And then he left there and he flew home, so he didn't stick around for the game. He was texting me during it, like, "What's the score? What's going on?" And he landed right in the ninth inning. He landed in Orlando at home from Iowa.
Hey, those commercials with him and his wife are so funny. Like I think
Yeah.
those are super and like photography. Like he just has these like great interests that like I didn't I didn't know he was a photographer, but like I've seen his stuff and I see him out there with his shooting games. And I'm like, this guy can do it all. This guy's the best.
Yeah, I joked with him once. I said, like, when I was a kid, I wanted to be Ken Griffey Jr., the baseball player, and as an adult, I want to be Ken Griffey Jr., the retired baseball player, because that seems like be a pretty decent life.
He does it the best. It's so cool.
He's great. He's a good dude. He's a good dude.
Oh yeah, like yeah, he's the coolest. He interacted with the video we put out. It just seems super 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 down to earth.
Yeah, I think he did interact with that. And he said something about me, and it's great.
Yeah, you two going back and forth in the comments was funny because people were like, "Is this the actual Ken Griffey Jr.?" just in the comments of this?
And it was totally Ken.
Oh gosh, that guy's the best. Trent, thank you so much for your time tonight. I really, really appreciate it. Can't wait to see what's next for Joey Votto. I will be reading your coverage on The Athletic as I do every single time. So you're the man, and I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.